How are all you guys doing? Glad you're here. With the additional revenues coming in from continued economic growth in Minnesota, we have a remaining balance of $350 million for the next biennium. I'm proposing to save over half of that, $202 million, in a contingency savings account, recognizing the uncertainties surrounding the federal budget and its implications for Minnesota, which some of which may not even be known until after this legislative session concludes. But we have done so much in the last 6 years to restore fiscal stability to Minnesota, both in the immediate and also for the future. And it's my number one priority to assure through this legislative session that stability is not sacrificed either for the next biennium or for the years that follow. My number one priority then for the supplemental budget is to increase funding for my pre-kindergarten proposal. The base for 18-19 in the forecast November was $54.7 million. My January budget proposal added $74.9 million for pre-K. And this revised budget increases the pre-K recommendation by another $100 million, which brings the total increase to $175 million. And the total investment in pre-K for 18-19, $229.7 million. I included some articles in the handouts of experiences communities have had who've been able to provide free pre-kindergarten to their families and the importance of that opportunity. And I also note the resistance of the House Republicans in particular to funding pre-K, for as the speaker said last year on more than one occasion, if you add pre-K to our public schools, then you add more teachers, and teachers join teachers' unions, and teachers' unions give money to Democrats. And that was just about as direct a statement of why so many thousands of Minnesota school children, or pre-K, preschool children, are unfairly denied the kind of quality learning opportunity that they deserve. So that's my number one priority. There are others that are listed here which we can elaborate on as you have an interest, and I'll turn over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Governor. I'd like to draw your attention to two additional proposals in the supplemental budget that I think are extremely worthy of attention from the legislature. And the first of them is the opioid stewardship program, where the governor is proposing $22 million each in the next 2 years of the biennium. This is a strategy to help local communities deal with the desperate scourge of opioid addiction that is happening all over the state of Minnesota, both in greater Minnesota and in the metro area, but I would say particularly hurtful in greater Minnesota. I want to thank Representative Baker in the House for his leadership on this. This is an issue that is personal to him, as many of you know, and also Senator Eaton and Senator Rosen in the Senate. Shelley Elkington from Montevideo has been a real leader on this, and I spoke with her this morning to tell her about this proposal, which, by the way, is paid for with a licensing fee on pharmaceutical companies. And Shelley told me that since the last Senate hearing on this bill, which was on March 13th, 4 people have died from this poison that is sweeping our state. The second item I'd like to draw your attention to is the proposals that we have in the supplemental budget related to North Star. We're proposing a 6-month demonstration project that we would do most likely with Amtrak, though it could be done with the existing North Star trains, to demonstrate the viability of nonstop service between Target Field and the endpoint in St. Cloud. Amtrak and BNSF have existing relationships that would allow us to do this demonstration project for 6 months. I have talked to so many people in St. Cloud who feel strongly that this is an important part of the city's economic vitality and opportunity. The governor's proposal also includes $850,000 to study the long-term need for extending this service permanently into St. Cloud, and those resources would be used both to take a fresh look at ridership as well as engineering. The numbers that we've been using on those for this are old and need to be refreshed. We've heard from some of our colleagues in the legislature in St. Cloud that they question those numbers, so this gives us a chance to really take another look at them and figure out what would be involved in extending that service. Thank you.
We're glad to respond to questions on this subject.
Lieutenant Governor, I'm sorry, how much is the actual dollar amount on the demonstration project in St. Cloud? I apologize.
No worries. The demonstration project would be $3 million, and that covers all aspects of having that train run from equipment, training of the engineers, and marketing, and making the whole system service ready.
There are those who will question this amount of money on a demonstration project when the financial viability of this project has been repeatedly questioned, even running between Big Lake and the Twin Cities. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would respond that the big open question of North Star, as the governor has often said, is that we've never really been able to have service all the way to St. Cloud, which is the obvious place for this train to run to, and this will give us an opportunity to assess that. I should point out, this would be one trip. So it would start in the morning in St. Cloud, it would come to Target Field, and then at the end of the day, it would go back again.
My view, one of the most nonsensical decisions made in the previous decade was to stop the North Star line 11 miles short of the major population center that it's supposed to be serving. So if you wanted to suppress the participation of the ridership in that, that would certainly be one of the strategies to do so. So to bring it to downtown St. Cloud would be the first time we can actually determine how much public support there is for it, and I think it'll be considerable.
Governor, some of the resistance to public school pre-K comes from the current providers of childcare who say that having a free public school pre-K option disrupts their business model. What do you say to that?
Well, I've increased the funding for quality childcare as well, for Parent Aware. Also providing money for home visits by qualified social workers and nurses to beginning mothers and fathers. But, I mean, the priority here ought to be what's best for the children, not what's the best interests of the adults who are supposedly serving the children. And I frankly find it appalling that anybody would oppose a quality pre-K opportunity for a child, usually when there's not one commensurate availability of quality childcare, particularly in greater Minnesota. But, you know, it ought to be the parents' discretion which is the best situation for their particular child, whether it's a quality child care or whether it's pre-kindergarten. But to say that we're going to deny 4-year-olds the best start in life because of political considerations or because of business considerations, I just find appalling.
Governor, the money that's being left on the bottom line, is it $200 million? Is it your preference to see that money left on the bottom line, or might that come into play during budget negotiations with legislators later this
Well, I want to leave it, as I said, as a contingency savings account. Now, families put away money into savings accounts, and given the uncertainties of the federal budget in particular, its impact on Minnesota, I think it's just part of the prudence we need to establish to take advantage of the fact that we have a healthy surplus for these next 2 years. Not enough to do everything that I would like and the legislature would like, but certainly enough that we can work it out and still protect the fiscal integrity of Minnesota for the years to follow.
Isn't that what the rainy day fund is for, though?
Well, that's a separate category. From an accounting standpoint, the reserve fund doesn't show in next November forecast is shown as a liability. Yeah, an obligation rather than as a an asset. So that's one of the reasons to make that determination. Also, it does provide some flexibility. We'll see how it comes out at the end of the session. But again, my number one priority for this session is fiscal integrity and prudence.
Your Department of Human Services has estimated that, some of the changes talked about on the federal level to Medicaid funding could mean, well more than $1 billion just in the next 2 years. Is $200 million enough?
No, not if it's that measure of $2 billion or something of that magnitude. I mean, we'll have to see what the full impact is going to be. There's, of course, Congress has to act, and there's a lot of debate about what the timing date will be for some of these cuts to take effect. But there's no question if the kinds of drastic reductions that the Trump administration is proposing are enacted, and when they take effect, it's going to have a devastating effect on Minnesota's budget, and that's all the more reason why we need to hold on to the reserve and have this savings account to protect ourselves as best possible. But we're not going to be able to make up for everything that they're talking about cutting.
Like to have a contingency account prioritize perhaps healthcare at the top and then other things on your list so that it doesn't go to whatever.
Well, if we leave it in the savings at the end of the legislative session, then it'll be available not at the executive branch's discretion, but it'll be available for appropriation in the next legislative session or thereafter. So it keeps all the options open.
Governor, the opioid program, or perhaps Lieutenant Governor, the fee on this, will this be a fee per prescription? If someone gets a prescription like this, or to be a fee assessed to the companies, or how would this be administered?
So this is a little technical, but it would be the fee is a 1 cent per morphine milligram equivalent, which adds up to somewhere in the neighborhood of a penny a pill, and it would be assessed on the pharmaceutical companies.
Can someone talk about what you have to revise the Supreme Court Appeals Panel? What's that about?
Those are the appeals that people who are now in Moose Lake and St. Peter are making for their release, and that require going to a special panel of retired Supreme Court justices, or retired judges that are set up by the Chief Justice, but require, because of the number of those that are now moving forward for the very first time, requires additional funding to be able to make staff those services. Is that correct? Yeah.
You're trying to have more judges because there will be more cases, or just
More people are moving forward with their appeals to be released either provisionally or unprovisionally. More of those are making it through the determination process, and then the final decision is made on appeal by the individual or by the DHS. If they oppose the decision, goes to this special panel. And there's a different one constituted for each case. So there are, after years of having no cases at all, we're now dealing with the beginning of these, and they will continue. There's 690 people that are in some stage of these two prisons, so we'll have to see what unfolds.
court case? Because I thought that the state was kind of in the clear for now on that.
Well, we made the case to the court, which the Federal Court of Appeals upheld, that our state policy laws and policies are constitutional. And one of the arguments that the proponents of the made was that nobody was being released. So they were essentially not just indeterminate, but they were lifetime sentences. So we made the case, in part, that we are beginning now, have begun to provide for a very carefully limited basis for people to demonstrate they meet very strict measures and continue to provide, have proper supervision to be released. And I can't say what the appeals court, how they weighted that consideration, but they ruled in the state's favor.
Governor, can you talk about the Super Bowl tax exemption as well and the context of that?
Well, we exempted, the legislature exempted the tickets for the Super Bowl itself from the sales tax. There were discussions made at the time we were putting together the state proposal. You guys leaving us? Well, thanks for coming by.
Bye.
Bye. You guys were very good. Bye.
You can take a picture after we're done.
I don't know if they're going to stay around that long.
Bye.
So we're extending that that exemption to the tickets for other related events. And that was part of the discussion that was made when the Super Bowl presentation was made.
Other questions on the subject? Could you elaborate a little bit on the law enforcement provisions, the soft body armor and $2 million for funding that could help implement future recommendations from the council we created?
Well, the body armor is funded, but it was insufficient for the need. And I believe that law enforcement officers should be provided that. I don't think they should have to pay for that out of their own salaries. The council has been working and has made some preliminary recommendations. We'll be making more in the coming weeks, and I've added $10 million in the Workforce Development Fund for particularly minority applicants to expand our outreach in minority communities in the metropolitan area and throughout the state to bring more people into employment opportunities in state government and elsewhere.
Situation in Washington. In addition to the proposals for Medicaid cuts to the states, are there particular elements of the Trump proposal that you think would cause Minnesota to need to make a quick response to tap the savings fund that you're establishing?
Do you have an hour? I mean, they're just the list is just astonishing. NIH, cutting funding for NIH, eliminating funding for humanities and for endowment of the arts for public broadcasting. What they've done, opposed to doing the EPA and water quality and climate change that they disavow responsibility for. Again, I'm putting my trust in the Congress is a perilous leap of faith, but I'm hoping that they will exercise some measure of good judgment. Transportation, the transit, all the projects, as I read it, including the light rail lines, would not be funded going forward, which makes some people very happy, but I think this would be a big mistake. And combined with what's happening here, public transit, including the bus service, is going to, if both of them or all of them were to go through, have a devastating effect on quality of public transit in the metropolitan area. I could come up with more if I thought about it, but that's a good start. Bad start.
Governor, the Senate Republicans yesterday, speaking of budgets, proposed their tax targets, $900 million, including a reduction in the lowest bracket. I want to get a chance to review those and what your thoughts are there.
Well, there wasn't much to review. They couldn't or wouldn't tell you what percent they're talking about. Our budget proposal, we put 3,000 pages of itemization for the budgets that I proposed in January and now the supplemental. Credit to MMB. Thank you. I mean, I don't know what you guys did yesterday. I read the readout from the press event. You couldn't, I mean, we asked the tax chairman what percent cut we're talking about and for the lowest rate, and he said he knew, but he wouldn't tell or couldn't tell or whatever it was. I mean, I don't know what that is. $900 million for income tax and Social Security tax and business property tax and whatever else they've tossed in there. I mean, we'll have to see what that gets them, and also what the out years are going to be. My principle will be if they want to cut taxes, then they got to pay for it up front. And none of these phase in to get by next biennium and then ratchet it up in the subsequent ones. That's when the real forecast uncertainty is the highest, and that's what happened in 1999 and 2000. I mean, the immediate effect was, we had a surplus. But the effect in the years following, for the decade following, was catastrophic. those who don't learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat its mistakes. And I just urge legislators and anybody in the public who's, intrigued by these proposals to consider the implications for years ahead. So the answer to your question is I don't know. We'll see. I'm glad they came forward with the targets. I believe they're coming forward with spending targets today, transportation next Monday. That's important progress. The House will follow suit, I trust, and then we'll have something more specific to talk about.
Anything else on the supplemental budget?
For the ag training grant, I see that the current one would already fund 43 programs. Do you have a number that you expect the additional funds?
I'm sorry.
For the ag educators grant?
Oh, I wish I could find the name of the student. She was at FFA here 6 weeks or so ago, and then she came again with, it was the Farmers Union or Farm Bureau? Farmers Union. And she asked me, suggested the first time, she said there's not money for teaching high school kids about agriculture, about careers in agriculture, whether it's in farming or in various agriculture services. So I said I'll put money in my budget for it, and then I forgot. And it's happened before. It probably happened again. And so she called me on it when the Farmers Union came. And I said, okay, thank you very much, and I'm going to guarantee you it's going to be in the supplemental. And we've tried it through FFA and the Farmers Union to identify the name of the student. So whoever you are out there in northwestern Minnesota who got this is your money.
Programs like that mostly concentrating in rural areas?
Yeah, the farm belt areas of Minnesota, and again for the high school programs, high school curricula.
Good on the civic?
Governor, obviously it hinges on the number of the tax rate reduction, but on its face, how would you feel about a modest reduction to the lowest income tax tier?
I mean, all tax cuts are popular. At the time, you got to look at the consequence. Again, I have to see it in the context of their total budget. They're talking about $600 million now for reinsurance, funded out of general fund or reserve or somewhere, and $900 million for tax cuts, and they're going to take money out of transportation to general fund for that. So I don't know what all this adds up to as yet. And as I said, it's one thing to make it fit for the next biennium, but it's much more challenging to make it fit for the future biennia. And I just say again, if we didn't learn our lesson from 1999, 2000, cutting Jesse checks, and what that meant for the state for the next decade in terms of chronic deficits and all the pain that those imposed. And I go back again, we have not raised anybody's taxes in Minnesota. Their incomes have gone up, state taxes, except for smokers, state income tax or sales tax. These are the same rates that Minnesotans had under Governor Pawlenty. They're the same rates that I inherited from that administration. They're the same rates they've been since I took office, except for the wealthiest 2%. And the reason we have a surplus, primary reason, is because I raised taxes on the wealthiest 2%. It's $1.4 billion for the next biennium. Nobody else in Minnesota is paying for that surplus, except what they've already put in through their other regular taxes. But this notion that we raise taxes and therefore we owe to return it is just a fallacy. And also the notion we need to do this to continue our economic growth is a proven fallacy given the record we've had of economic growth over the last 6 years and the recognition, national recognition. We put together better state government, better services, better quality is recognized by so many outside groups. And these people don't want to acknowledge that because it doesn't serve their political or ideological interests to do so. But the facts are the facts. And to upset all that, jeopardize all that, I'm going to oppose it to the very best of my ability.
Governor, what do you think of Dr. Noseworthy's comments about private?
Well, that's another subject.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'll answer it. I don't know. It really astonished me. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it's, and on the face of it, I think the commissioner of DHS, addressed it properly. I mean, I don't even know if it's legal under federal or state law, but it's just not so contrary to what I know about Mayo.
Lieutenant Governor, on that topic, you sit on the DMC board. It's a lot of public money that's potentially going to the Mayo expansion. Should there be some slowdown or pause given this comment about prioritizing people with private insurance?
Well, the DMC project is a really, really important economic development project that helps not only Mayo, but it helps everybody who lives in Rochester and southeastern Minnesota. And that's why I'm really pleased to be able to put my time and energy into it. Having said that, I really supported what the Commissioner of Human Services said today. We need to look into what exactly Mayo is doing. And it is unacceptable that an organization that is benefiting, in my mind, it's unacceptable that an organization that is benefiting so greatly from the strength of Minnesota, I mean, they need to also accept their responsibilities for treating everybody in Minnesota. And I want to just add that, we have to all keep our hats on here. Mayo Clinic treats a large number of people on public health programs. And I respect them for doing that.
Anything else on the supplemental before we open up to everything else? Okay.
Hey, on other subjects, related to yesterday's questions about the NCAA bracketology, I want to point out that genius is not always recognized in immediate reality. That, as Dido said, there'll be no white flags above this door. And I'm doubling down on my prediction that the Minnesota women's hockey team are going to win tonight and Sunday and become national champions once again. On a more serious note, I've read, just shocked by what experience of Representative Rod Hamilton has been, whereas his Mayo doctor's recommendation or prescription for 2 pills a day was reduced by a benefits manager down to 1 per day. I just find that to be unfathomable and unconscionable. And if that's how we're talking about saving healthcare money in Minnesota and nationally, we're going down a very dangerous path. So I support his legislation. I urge the House to give it a hearing. I'll do everything I can to see it's incorporated and adopted in this legislative session. That responds to questions on that or anything else.
Governor, have you had any subsequent conversations with the CEOs of the HMOs since the exchange of letters? Lauren Gilchrist, my senior advisor on healthcare, has received contact from Jim Showalter asking to meet next week. And I said I'm willing to meet, but first I wrote that letter not to the group collectively. I wrote that letter to each CEO individually. And I would like to see from each of them in writing their response to the questions I raised there. And then I'd be glad to meet with them after that as individually or as a group. But I want to see it in writing. This subject's been evaded by in some of the hearings and conversation I've heard from legislators of both parties who've been pressing. Are you going to continue to provide health care in the individual market if you get this reinsurance? Are you going to, what's effect is it going to have on your rates? And nobody's been able to get a firm commitment on any of that. I want to see it in writing. I think we should know what we're paying for here, as any consumer would want to do.
Governor, do you have any reaction? I don't know if you've heard about the situation in Delano, the black family that was run out of town after the home was burglarized and vandalized. Any response to that?
It's just horrible. And I've invited the family to lunch at the governor's residence tomorrow. It'll be a close to the press, so I'll have comment afterward. It's just horrible. So un-Minnesotan, so illegal, so immoral. I denounce it in the strongest possible terms, and I give credit to the builder, I don't recall his name, but is willing to buy the home back at his own expense. Others who have stepped forward to express, as I do, their solidarity with this family, their embrace of this family, and their horror at this immoral behavior.
Other questions?
Governor, in saying that this House shouldn't pay for its pay raise, for the pay raise, Speaker Dowd said he heard comments made by you and Commissioner Franz that seemed to term these as optional. What comments did you make on that front, and do you see the pay raise as optional?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm certainly not a constitutional scholar. I don't know, I can't remember exactly what I said. I've said for a couple of years that I support legislators getting a pay increase. And I do it. I think the commission, to its enormous credit, acted very responsibly. And within the charge that was made under the constitutional amendment and following legislation, and you know, people want to play politics with it. That's their prerogative. I don't, within the limits of what the law allows, and I don't know what that is. And are you a lawyer? You're not a lawyer. You're a lawyer. Well, then I'm not going to let him comment on the subject for sure. We're not, you know, it's their domain. Yeah.
Do you think, Governor, that Speaker Dowd is playing politics with it?
What?
Do you think that Speaker Dowd is playing politics with it?
Well, I think anybody who's running for governor or might run for governor next year is playing politics, at least in part, with what they're doing now.
Governor, the House yesterday approved a LIFO bill. Have you taken a position on it?
I oppose it. I've said that before. I think if they, you know, I support it's an existing statute that school districts would negotiate their own agreements, but I would oppose taking the seniority as the default fallback in the absence of those.
Everyone good? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.